Well, good morning. My name is Mike Bryan. I'm a volunteer with the Southern Arizona VA in Tucson, Arizona, working on the Veterans History Project. Today's date is it's New Year's Day, 2017, January 1, and we're at the home of Air Force pilot officer Alan Rose, and here to catch. I've read his story, and it is totally fascinating, and we're in for a real treat. So first off, Alan, why don't you give me your full name and your birthday?
Okay, George Allen Rose, November 13th, 1942.
Okay. Well, why don't we just jump right in, and you start out with like the early years in your family and what kind of led up to that, your involvement, your interest in the Air Force.
Okay. My birth name was Norbert Mishler. I was adopted. I'd have to go ask Becky exactly. She remembers the dates and whatnot. Becky's my wife. Anyway, I was adopted by Glenn and Lois Rose, and they changed my name to George Allen Rose. And I'll get to how I found out about Norbert Mishler eventually. Anyway, George, after my grandfather and Mom and Dad's best friend, George Cole, my grandfather was George Steele McMillan, on my mom's side, of course. And then Alan came from, my mom was infatuated with Alan Ladd, the movie star. So that's that. Mm-hmm. So Mom and Dad, or Dad was in the Army. He was a captain in the infantry, training to do a tank destroyer unit. Initially, I think he was a company commander. I think. I don't really recall for sure. Memory being what it was at that time. Anyway, they picked me up in Kansas City. We went to, he was stationed at ostensibly Fort Hood. They had little posts all around central Texas. And somewhere in there, he banged up his back. He was an athlete, All-American basketball at the University of Arkansas in 1927. First All-American team they actually named. So, very athletic, but he was jumping a ditch. They were running an obstacle course. He was jumping a ditch and hit his heels and compressed some vertebrae, and therefore became essentially 4F. But people said, "The coach, you've got all this experience because you've been coaching basketball and football." So he was transferred to Camp Grant, Illinois, Rockford, Illinois, and the team that he had at Camp Grant actually played the Chicago Bears in Soldier Field. The Soldier Field is still there, and won. Of course, what a lot of people don't know is that most of the pro players had been drafted or had volunteered to go into the service, and so his team was a little better than the Bears were. So anyway, got out, returned to Fayetteville. We stayed there for a few years. Then we moved to Nacogdoches, Texas. Daddy was a coach at Stephen F. Austin, at the time State Teachers College. 48, 49, 50. Let's see, I started school in 48 at West End Elementary. Went through the 4th grade in Nacogdoches, and then Daddy got a job offer to come back to Arkansas and coach there. So part of the deal was some backers gave or bought Dad a lot to build the house, and very nice lot. We lived there until, let's see, Mom passed away in 2000, and we sold the house in 2000. So from 1952 to 2000.
Well, somewhere in your story, I remember you talking about hearing the B-52s.
Oh no, B-36s.
B-36.
Yeah, that happened while we were in Texas. There used to be an Air Force Day and an Army Day and a Navy Day and all that instead of the Armed Forces Day like now. And on one occasion, the B-36 had just come into operation with Strategic Air Command, and they were based in Carswell, in Fort Worth. And they had publicized that to demonstrate the air power that these B-52, or excuse me, B-36s were going to fly around the major highways in Texas. And Highway 59 that ran from Texarkana down to Houston, came right through Nacogdoches. And so at an appointed hour, we're all out on Main Street, and you can hear the distinct. To this day, I can remember the distinct rumble of that B-36. So it came flying by, a flight of three, and I told my mom, or she told me later. She said, "What you said was, that's what I want to do is fly airplanes." So that's where the first seed got planted, I guess.
Well, it took root.
Well, it did take root, yeah. Anyway, so we moved back to Fayetteville. I went to all the way through school, high school and college. Graduated from the University of Arkansas in 1964. Early on, Dad had said, he said, if you're going to go in the service, you want to make sure you go in as an officer. And he said, you don't want to be in the Army. He said, you want to fly airplanes, I recommend, think about the Air Force. So it was kind of cut and dried. I signed up for ROTC first time and went 4 years ROTC, got my commission. And then off to Laredo, Texas for pilot training in 1965. It was.
It seemed like somewhere along that way you were having some trouble with the physicals.
Oh, yeah, I made a mistake. I'd had a bicycle wreck in a concussion, and funny you mention it. That's what you get for putting it in a book. Anyway, I started going through summer camp down in England Air Force Base, Louisiana, and a couple of us went over to the little cadet club to have a beer or something in the afternoon. Couldn't have been a beer, I guess just a Coke. Anyway, there's a guy in there in civvies, and he said, well, boys, how you doing, what you doing, so on and so forth, what's on the agenda tomorrow? And we said, well, we're getting our physicals, flight physicals. He says, oh, I expect any problems. No. I said, I had a concussion when I was a kid, but I'm not going to tell him anything. Well, guess who I was talking to was a flight surgeon. So I walk in the next morning, he said, oh, yeah, you. So they took away my option to fly, pending evaluation. So I had to go get, x-rays and an EEG and all that stuff, and which turned out fine. It was just, the pain in the butt to do it. Then my senior year in college, part of the thing was a flight indoctrination program, FIP. Got my private pilot's license through that program, and took my dad up flying. He was my first passenger and only passenger for a long time. Nobody really wants to go fly with somebody that's only got about 50 hours in the airplane. Anyway, then off to Laredo after I graduated. Well, a few months after I graduated. Graduated in May of 64, and pilot training started in January 65, class 66E at Laredo.
Well, that was an interesting period of time between your graduation, though, and when you started your training, because you didn't work for, Bureau of Land.
Well, yeah, I went to Colorado to work for the Bureau of Land Management, and when that particular, I was a fire control specialist with them, and when the money ran out in that pot of money, the Forest Service said, well, come over here, we still have some money. So I worked for them for about 3 months.
Just flying and looking for fires.
Yeah, fighting fires in some cases, or preparing for fires. And then we did all kinds of stuff. We'd build fences, repair fences, do mark-off timber sales where the government...
It's interesting that you were able to use that flying experience even in your part-time work before you went.
Well, yeah. Well, I was able to parlay that where I was in Kremlin, Colorado's heart of big hunting country, and one of the guys that ran the Esso gas station. He said, I can always use somebody down there cleaning windows or doing something. But I'd seen this little Cessna 150 out at the airport, and I asked him, I said, who owns it? Oh, I own it. I've got a heart condition. I can't fly it. Can you fly it? Yeah, I can fly it. So I would put the gas in and get to flying essentially for free. And then some guy at the station one night says, you got anybody, can, fly me around the area here and look for things? And Doyle says, yeah, he said, that fellow right over there, he's a young lad, da-da. And so I met this guy at the airport at dark early. We took off and flew around, and he was more just on a scenic trip than anything, But I mentioned to my boss when I got back, I told him, I said, I'm going to be just a little bit late coming in, and he said, oh, no big deal. And he said, well, what'd you do? And I told him what I'd done. And he said, would you like to maybe do that once a week or so? Just fly the district, as we call it, looking for smokes that are not where they're supposed to be, campfires. So I got, free flight, on the government time. And the FAA never heard that.
So then after that stint, then that's when you went into training?
Yeah, at Laredo. We called our class the Laredo Escadrille. And I'm not sure really how that ever came to be, but we started with a 32 or 33. That's still, nobody's real sure. And going along through training, everything's fine. A couple of guys said this isn't for me and bailed out, or eliminating themselves from the program. And we got about to what they call a 30-hour check in the T-37, the first airplane you're in. And I think we went in there with 25 or 26 guys. And at the end of that 30-hour check, we look around, there's 18 of us left. And washout rate was a little higher than the normal. And we became pretty tight. Tight to the point that we still get together about every other year. We have attended each other's couple of funerals. We know where everybody is, what everybody did. Just an outstanding outfit. Just a great group of guys. The instructors, we had a reunion done in San Antonio last year. We actually had some of our instructors show up. They're in the area. They said, yeah, we remember when you guys went through training 50 years ago. So it was, of course, they were 2 or 3 years older than us at the time, and still 2 or 3 years older. But they weren't at the time. You thought, oh wow, who is this guy now? You go, oh, okay. So they're good buds. But a great time down in Laredo. I met Becky there. She came down to visit a friend. Met her there, and she wasn't thrilled. Quite frankly, but we stayed in touch, and then I got an assignment to the F-4, going to Southeast Asia, destination unknown. You just, going to the Pacific Air Forces.
Well, before you go down that line of thinking, did the concussion raise its head again in the physical during that period of time?
Yeah, at the time, the Air Force, very parochial, every different command had their own thing. Like when I was in ROTC, that came under the auspices of Air University. Then I go to flight training, that came under the auspices of Air Training Command. Well, this hand does not talk to that hand, therefore, but there's my paperwork. Paperwork always goes with you. So the flight surgeon, whoa, wait a minute, he had a concussion. Grounded, out of here. Well, crushed. And said, but what we can do, we can send you up to Wilford Hall, and you can get a skull series, and you can do an EEG and whatnot. And so, I don't know, about 4 in the morning. 4 in the morning seems to ring a lot of bells in my head. Anyway, got in a van and with or station wagon with 4 or 5 other people, going up there for some kind of an exam or another, and went in for the EEG first. And there was this really cute little nurse in there. She said, now I'm going to hold your hand during this, because we've had some people, and they put all these probes in your head. And they just get a baseline of how your brain's operating. Then they start, strobe lights and all this kind of stuff to see if they can make your brain go bonk. And she said sometimes, guys and gals get a little panicky. And so she held my hand all through it, and she said, "You did good." Okay, thank you. And went back to Laredo, and now you never come out of the training. We were just doing ground training at the time. So back to Laredo, finished ground training, and by that point they had cleared me to fly. And so then off I went.
But it's just another hurdle to
Another hurdle.
And then there was a comment, I guess, you made to somebody was asking about what did you want to fly, and you said something about a C-135.
Yeah, C-135. Yeah, my instructor, God rest his soul, great guy, Carroll B. Arnie. The first day we're down on the flight line, once again, dark early, probably about 4, maybe a little bit later. The students go in, and we find our names are on a table, and so we are there, and my table mate, Stu Mosby, James S. Mosby, Georgia Bulldog. Stu and our are at this table, and the instructors come in, we all pop to, and this guy is a captain. Wow, captain. Comes up, and says, "Be seated, gentlemen." And so he is reading through a little bit of paperwork he's got on us, and he said, "Okay, Lieutenant Mosby, what are your aspirations if you complete pilot training?" If was used a lot, particularly if you're having a little bit of trouble. And Stu said, "I want to fly the F-4, sir." And I'm wondering, what the hell is the F-4? I knew of it, but not much. I knew it was primarily a Navy airplane, which it was at the time. The Air Force was just taking delivery of their version. And he said, "Okay, Lieutenant Rose, what about you?" And I said, "I'm going to fly C-135, sir." "You want to do what?" "I want to fly a C-135. And then probably fly airlines and whatnot. And of course, they were just starting to get to 707. The 727, I guess, is coming on now. 717 has been in business for years. And he looked at me over the top of his glasses, and he said, "We'll see about that." Well, Arnie was an F-86 pilot. He was a fighter pilot through and through. And during the decline after the Korean War, he'd been sent off to be a radar controller in Sioux City, Iowa. And came the opportunity to get back in the cockpit to be an instructor, and he jumped at it.
Well, the assumption was everybody wanted to be a fighter pilot, but you've been named a
No. We had guys that wanted to be bomber pilots, not in our class, but instructors. We had our class supervisor, Greg Hostetler, had been a 135 pilot, Major Hostetler. But they came from all different areas. But the fighter pilot thing starts to, particularly in our small group, and we had some really, really good pilots. We had a couple of guys that just kind of hung on. We got through. I had one guy, finally, he was going to be in the Air National Guard, Leroy Myers, and he's going back to Des Moines or somewhere, I forget. And his wing commander in the Guard came down and talked to him and said, "Leroy, you're going to go fly the F-100, and you're going to kill yourself." Leroy worked hard at every mission he flew, but sometimes all the pieces didn't quite fit. And so I said, "Tell you what, we're not going to take your commission away from you. Come back up there, and we'll do something with you." So he did. And he went on he retired as a lieutenant colonel, as I recall, in the Guard, having been a supply guy and other stuff. So, but anyway.
That's the one member you say you lost then.
After we got, yeah. And then, but anyway, so back to Arnie. One day we're going to fly our first flight's a dollar ride, they call it, where you just get to go out and say, "Wow, this is really cool," And Arnie says, "Okay, come on, Rose, we're going to be the weather ship." Now, at the time, from just south of San Antonio to the border was a non-radar controlled environment. And so everything was done visual. So we had to have visual flying conditions to operate. So Arne's job as a weather ship was to fly out, check out the different areas for training and see was it, worth doing anything. And so we went out and did that, and then I was flying most of the time. I mean, once I kind of figured out how to work a stick instead of a wheel.
Now, what are you flying at that point?
T-37, yeah. And Arnie said, okay, go over there, Okay, turn the airplane hard. So anyway, we got back in between some layers of clouds, and you get these towers that come up through there, just an updraft, and cathedrals, as some people call them, and we're weaving in and out around those things, yanking and banking, and this is kind of fun. Anyway, get back on the ground, and Arnie's filling out a complimentary grade slip, and he said, once again, looks over the top of his glasses, and he says, he said, how'd you like that, Rose? I said, I enjoyed that, sir. He said, you can't do that in a 135. Okay. So time passes on, go to the T-33 to finish up our training. Then we got our assignment block to choose what airplanes we wanted. And Arnie had given Stu and I a direct order that you will not turn that in until you come bring that to me so I get to see it. Because at this point we'd become friends. He'd had us over at his house, for hamburgers and hot dogs, and once again, just an all-around good guy. So our block came down, and it had, I forget, 12, 15 different types of airplanes, and you would rank them, from the first one you want to fly 1 through 15. Of course, down here at the bottom, at number 15 was the B-52. And then right on top of that was the 135 and all the main motors, and then I got up, and then it's okay. My first choice was an F-105. Second choice was an F-100. Third choice was an F-4. Third, fourth, and fifth, because there are 3 different places you could go: Europe, the Pacific, or stateside. And then there were F-102s and a couple RFs and stuff like that. So I filled it out, and one dark and dreary morning, foggy, kind of similar to what we're seeing here today in Tucson. Stu and I trooped up to where Artie had moved to a different job, and went in there and reported in a military manner, and handed him our selection sheets. And he looked at Stu's and he says, "That's good work, Stu. Great, I like that. Let me see yours, Gar." So I handed him mine. He looked over his glasses. He said, "A 105? When did you decide you wanted a fighter?" I said, "I think on the dollar ride." He said, "You little bastard." Good natured. Anyway, time goes along, way along. I'll finish the Arnie story. When we got back from Hanoi, we went to Maxwell Air Force Base for a rebluing, where they said, this is what happened while you guys were gone. Primarily designed for the older guys. But they said, if you would like us to find anybody for you, we'll find them. And one day this guy comes in, Wayne Lobenthal, who'd been stationed with me in Germany, comes in and said, "Hey, Gar," he said, I've got Arnie on the phone. And so I go, "Hey, Arnie." He started crying. He said, "I'm sorry. Did I talk you into going into fighters?" And I said, "That's bullshit, Arnie. You didn't do that." And anyway, many years passed. I ended up being stationed out here in Tucson, and somewhere I find out that Arnie is up in Mesa. He'd retired actually he had a heart attack as he was climbing into an airplane and fell off the ladder, and of course got grounded for that. Anyway, stayed up there, was running a print shop or something like that, or Alpha Graphics or something. Talked to him once or twice. Said, okay, we're going to get together. Never did. He passed away. You know, always take the time.
It's special.
Yeah.
It's special. It's the people that are special.
Very much so. So anyway, from there, went on to, left Laredo, went to survival school at Stead.
This is after you had orders for Southeast Asia?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Already. And then came here to Tucson for 2 months of radar training. You know, never worked with radar in our life. It was 2 weeks of training crammed into 2 months. Bunch of lieutenants running around Tucson. Life was good. Most of it was because we had to do a lot of simulator work actually with the radars, and there's only so many hours in a day. Left here, went to Florida. On the way, stopped by New Orleans where Becky was now working, and said, you know, something clicked, and got down to Tampa, and after about, I guess I'd been there maybe a month, I called her collect and asked her what she'd think about getting married, and she said, well, you send me the money for a ticket and I'll fly down and we'll talk about it. So she came down, and what we talked about was, what do we do with 2 cars, 2 TVs, 2 record collections, and 2 stereo systems? And other than that, it was a done deal. So she came down, we got married to chapel there. I finally met her parents. She met my dad. She had met Mom at graduation in Laredo. Then was off to Vietnam. Cameron Bay. I went through snake school, jungle survival school at Clark for just 3 days just to go out and sleep in a jungle. A lot of fun.
It's in the Philippines?
In the Philippines, yeah. And then we arrived at Cameron Bay. Left, I guess, about midnight out of Clark. Got it to Cameron, daybreak. And this full colonel comes out and greets us, and I think there were, 5, 6 of us, something like that, on the airplane, pilots. And he says, well, come with me. So we go to the command post, and 2 of the squadron commanders are in there, and he says, okay, Bison, how many pilots do you need? Jerry said, I need them all. He said, no, you can't have them all. I'll give you 5. So he literally said, okay, you 5, go with him. And there were 2 other guys, that's right, that went to the 557. So we troop off to the squadron, which is nothing more than 2 rooms, literally in a big old hangar. And not like, a nice squadron building or anything. But it beat a Quonset hut, or at least we were air conditioned. We're standing there and giving the sergeant our papers and whatnot, and in walks this guy, and he says, holy cow, new meat, thank God. And he takes off his flag gear, drops it right there. He says, I quit, I'm done. And he had been in the initial group that came to Cameron, and he had volunteered to stay over. We found out later that because he was in love with one of the donut dollies, which is another story. Anyway, he eventually went back to the States in short order after about 2 weeks, but never flew again. His job was to make sure, that there was beer in the cooler, and that was about it. So I was there for 9 months. Flew. We got at the time they had a program for every 20 missions that you flew over North Vietnam, you got a month off of your tour. So I got 3 months off, so I came back after 9 months and joined up with Becky in Knoxville, Tennessee. We drove to see my folks and then back to see her folks. Then it was up to New Jersey, put the car on a boat to go to Europe, and we were going to be stationed in Spangdahlem Air Base, Germany.
Talk a little bit about the missions that you were flying.
Yeah. We flew primarily in country. I had 160 round numbers, I think it's 162. 100, of which 60 were over the north. Only a couple of them into the real high threat zones. But there wasn't any place there was no threat, I guarantee you that. Those little guys are all over everywhere, and every one of them had at least one rifle, if not two, and they loved to shoot at you even though you didn't know it. A sizable number of missions into Laos, which we weren't supposed to be going into then. Yeah, we were all going, what do you mean? And there were a couple of real hot spots over there that were not quite like going in over Hanoi, but you could definitely get hurt. And we had a couple of planes shot down out of the squadron over there. But most of the stuff was in country. I'd say probably 40% were all in country. Some close air support, support of the Army, or Marines, as the case may be. Some in support of the Vietnamese, and then some were just going after supply stores that somebody had found and whatnot. And but fortunately, I never took it. I was flying with a guy named Arthur G. Christopoulos, Art, good guy. God rest his soul. He believed in training as well, and so while I'm riding around the back seat doing my duties back there, he said, "Okay, now do this and do this and because this is why you want to do this," and so on and so forth. And then he started letting us, a couple of us, in our small flight of 8 people, we would brief the missions. We would lead the missions from the back seat, doing all the radio chatter and a whole bit, and the talking to the fact. And the only thing that the front seater would do would be to roll in for the attack, and we'd pull off and come back on. If we're going to do a formation landing, we do a formation landing. And Art was a great guy. I was going to fly a mission one day. It had to be somewhere just about the 10th of June or so. And it was just going to be a go out and, put some, turn some trees into toothpicks, as we called it. We're going to do a shake and bake. We had napalm and 500-pound retards. We're going to be our load. Well, I woke up in the morning, and I could not hardly breathe. My ears were plugged up, and we always had spare guys that would get up and go down to fly. And so I went down to Art's room. I said, "Hey, boss, I'm not going to make it today." And that was supposed to be my Fin E flight. And I said, "We'll just reschedule." I said, hell, my D-Rose or Freedom Bird doesn't go for 10 more days or so. Well, about 7:30 in the morning, something like that, Art comes into the room. And we had, our rooms are blacked out. You couldn't see the nose in front of your face. So the door opens. And I look up, and he says, "Hey, Gar, turn on your light." So I turn the little overhead light there. And he hands me a glass. It's about 2/3 full of scotch. I said, "What the hell is that all about?" And he said, "Drink it." Okay. So that's your champagne. No, I want to fire one more, he said. No. Ed and Larry went in this morning. You're done. So that was the first tour.
That was Ed Leary.
Yeah. Ed Larry Silver.
He took your place on the.
No, they ran a flight. It was just that, I would have been there when they died. And Chris just said, "You're done. No more chances." So advanced many years down the road, called the wall.
That's the guys.
tough.
Well, talk a little bit about the, so after you come back then after that, and that's when you start packing up and heading to Germany?
Yeah, yeah.
And so is that a good assignment? or-
Oh, it's a great assignment. Yeah, the wing that I went to was the 49th Tech Fighter Wing, was just transitioning from the F-105 to the F-4. So actually, when I showed up at Spangdahlem, I was the first backseater in a squadron, and I think they had 5 or 6 front seaters who had transitioned from the 105 and were there just to kind of get us all combat ready and up to speed. Then they were going to go get their turn to go to Vietnam. And the squadron commander was a fellow named Felix Fowler. Felix was had been recalled during the Berlin crisis in 58, I think, whatever it was. He'd been a cop in Cleveland. Well, somebody comes over and knocks on the door where we were staying in temporary quarters and said, hey, you want to go with the commander tomorrow and fly down to Aviano, Italy? And I said, sure. I have no clue. And so this fellow was Larry McGovern. He said, don't worry. He said, I'll do all the planning. He said, you're just going to ride with the boss. Okay, good. So we don't even brief him. I go and get my flight gear. I go out to the airplane, and well, here comes Felix, Colonel Fowler, Lieutenant Colonel Fowler, and here comes full colonel, it's a maintenance guy, O.R. Smith, whom I had just by other associations had heard of before, and Larry. So anyway, so we fire up the airplanes, taxi out, and pull on the runway, and Felix says, "Okay," he said, "You got it." And the colonel's on our wing. He said, "You got it," and he said, "I'll put it in afterburner for you, and I'll do all the head nods for the gear up and the flaps and all that kind of stuff." I said, well, okay. Well, I haven't flown now in probably 2 months, so it's gonna be interesting. Off we go, and as we're rolling down the runway, and I have to look out this side around the instrument panel and the boss's ejection seat in front. So we're rolling down through there, and here comes the smoke wafting up. Felix was notorious for smoking a cigarette on his takeoff roll, which I did not know. We get airborne, we fly on, and I'm doing everything. I'm doing a radio calls and whatnot. Well, the French are very persnickety about how you pronounce their, towns and whatnot. So I knew how to pronounce Strasbourg, which is where we entered France. And we're at this beautiful, clear day. And we get to the next place. It was called Dijon, like the mustard, Dijon. And I butchered that. And they didn't even respond. Because that was back in the days when you say, okay, we're at Dijon at this time, at this altitude, the next reporting point is Luxeuil, and on and on. Well, when I called Luxeuil, the guy came and said, so whatever your call sign was, it's Luxeuil. Okay, so we're going down, and the weather got bad when we got down towards Aviano. So we're going to have to do an instrument approach. And so we split off the colonel goes down first, and then it's our turn to go down. So we're shooting this, in the weather, and I'm, working my butt off, trying to fly as smooth and as good as I can. And this thing involved, you go out a ways, and then you make a teardrop to come back in to line up with the runway. And I'm just starting a teardrop turn to come back, and we had a thing called hot mic or cold mic, where a hot mic is where you can hear the other guy breathe and whatnot. Cold mic is, you don't hear anything. And Felix came up, hot mic. And he said, you know how when you show up in a new base, how you have to go back and certify that your flight records are correct and whatnot? He said, yes, sir. He said, well, I sat down and actually went through mine when I signed in here, a couple of months ago. He said, and I forget the date now, it was At one point, I knew it quite well, but then sometime in late 1944, he had bombed Aviano when he was a aircraft commander on a B-24 Liberator. Yeah.
Well, come on.
Yeah. So, well, needless to say, at that I'm going, holy shit. Anyway, so we land, and somebody gave him a staff card. So, well, he said, Roosevelt, we don't have anything to do, until the colonel says he's ready to go back. Let's go down to the Rod and Gun Club and have a hamburger, So we went down there, and he did a little interrogation, about, okay, what's your real background and so on and so forth. And there are, in this world, round numbers, 50 guys. They would swear that Felix was the best squadron commander we ever had. A lot of us adopted some of his leadership techniques as we progressed into command positions and whatnot. Just one hell of a guy. And, anyway, so there we are in Germany. The primary thing in Germany was Cold War. We set nuclear alert. We flew low levels. We went to Wheelus, Tripoli, Libya, for gunnery training. Went to Aviano occasionally for some gunnery training with them on an Italian range down there. But essentially it was, okay, you're on alert for 2 days, you get off, you get a day off, then you go fly for a day, maybe two, back on alert, just kind of.
So what were you flying at that point?
F4, still the F4.
Still the F4.
Yeah.
Were you flying around with nuclear?
No, you never flew with the nukes, but they were behind a double cyclone fence thing in the alert area. Yeah. Each squadron had 4 lines, as we call it, targets that we'd have to, essentially in Delby you could fly without ever seeing a map.
Yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time studying the maps. That's the thing on it. And but no, we never fly with them.
What happened? You were there a few years before you got your orders then to back to Vietnam.
Oh yeah, I did a year at Spangdahlem. They closed down that wing, brought it back to New Mexico, to Holloman Air Force Base. I moved to Hahn Air Base, which was 30 miles away, and essentially the same thing all over again. Duke Alert, go train. Now we're starting to go into Spain to do some training. And we're there for 2.5 years, and then came back from Spang to Seymour Johnson in North Carolina. Yeah, one thing I want to point out is that just prior to leaving Spangdahlem to go to Hahn, all of us in the back seat who were pilots got checked out in the front. By checked out, I mean, we could fly the front, we got to do a little bit of gunnery down at Wheelus, but we weren't quote unquote certified as combat ready in the front. But it was just a matter of waiting until enough people rotated back to the States and you kept moving up the ladder to when you got to be upgraded permanently to the front seat. And that happened pretty short order after we got to Hahn. I forget exactly when, but probably early 70s, 69 or so. Anyway, and that's a whole different realm up there. A lot more responsibility and whatnot. And became a flight lead, element lead, then a flight lead. And then we rotated, let's see, I came back to Nellis, went through the fighter weapons school in early 69 in an experimental program where they put 4 of us who were backseaters through. And we all did good, And they said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. So they canceled the program, and so we didn't get certain specialty code designations, which pissed off 4 of us off, but we lived with it. Came back to the States in early 71 to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina. There we trained, we had a twofold commitment, if you will. The squadron I was assigned to, the 334th Attack Fighter Squadron, Fighting Eagles. We were the Alpha Squadron for TAC, for deployments worldwide. Primarily, we had a commitment to Europe to come back over if things started heating up. We also had a little-known thing that we would practice probably more than we did for Europe. We had targets in Cuba, conventional targets that we would, you know, if there were certain things started to happen, there were tankers out there, we'd take off, go refuel, and go to Cuba, and then come back to the States somewhere.
Did you actually make those flights, or was that all standby?
We would go to the tanker, and that's as far. And we didn't have the munitions on board either. It was all scenario type stuff.
But that Cold War period, that would have been a
It's all Cold War, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, there were all kinds of, you know, there were things. We stood down at Han once, I think for about 10 days. And didn't turn a wheel, didn't do anything, could not find out why. Nobody knew. Nobody was flying. What the hell is this? Well, I've since learned from a guy that was on the air staff at the time, or working in the Pentagon, that there had been some kind of low glitch in one of the ICBM programs where they kind of kept everybody on the ground so, you know, so we could launch if we really had to. And we didn't load out, but if tension started going out, we were going to load up, and we would be able to get into Moscow or anywhere like that. We didn't have that kind of range, but B-52s could. We just wouldn't have the missiles doing everything.
So that's kind of the setting then when you get the call to gather up early in the morning. When you got the assignment for Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, we were doing a training thing. We were actually right in the middle of an operational readiness inspection, which is done by the headquarters at Tactical Air Command. And let's see, we'd already done the conventional stuff. We had done the nuclear simulation, and now we were going to be doing an air defense exercise. And we all show up for the briefing. And we look around, and we realize that we're all captains, lieutenants, and majors, that there's not one lieutenant colonel or colonel in the room. And time passes, and it gets to be the old joke about, you know, when you're in college, well, how long do you wait, you know, for the professor? 10 minutes, you know, or whatever. Or 10 for an instructor and 20 for a professor, I guess it was, something like that. Well, finally, our squadron commander walks in, and Crawford Shock, and he says, okay, no phone calls, you don't leave the building, and I'll be back in a while. And we had guys there from all three squadrons. And so he says, you guys, Rocketeers, go back to 336. Chiefs, you go back to 335th. You're going to get the same commands there. No phone calls. Then, of course, you know, cell phones weren't, they weren't even a pipe dream there. And so Shock goes back somewhere, and then he comes and gets up on the podium there and says, okay, this is what's going to happen. Go over to mobility and get your mobility bag for real. And take it home and pack it for real. Because most of us had old underwear, old socks and stuff, just, you know, something to have. And so he said, well, should we pack for hot or cold? He said, I can't tell you that. So we didn't know if we were going to launch and go to Europe and cover some, because things just started happening over in Vietnam in early April.
And what year was this?
72.
72.
Yeah. And so he said, oh, Colonel Shockley, what would Jimmy Fox think? And Jimmy Fox had been our previous commander, big, you know, he wanted to get in a dogfight so bad, it's unbelievable. He could fly a hell of an airplane in air-to-air training and whatnot. And Shock just kind of grinned. He said, oh, shit, okay, we're going west. And He said, okay, be back here at such and such time. And so I had ridden my bicycle down, we were living on base. And so I'm pedaling home, and I've got this mobility bag kind of balanced on the back there, and I'm pedaling up the street, and here came Becky down, going to the commissary. And I said, she said, what are you doing? I said, no, come on home. And we got some packing to do. And she said, oh my God. Anyway, so we repacked the mobility bag for real. And then she drove me down to the squadron, and you take it in, or to the mobility place, and you check your bag, and they give you a little card, and then you go through the processing line. Okay, do you have a will? And then we go back over to ops, and say, okay, here's the next plan. 7 o'clock, billeting. Everybody's in billeting. Oh shit, this is for real. Okay, I mean, we knew it was. And so we all check into billeting, wives leave, and that was it. Next morning up early, have a low residue meal, and taxi out, take off, 6 ship. We're told, finally told, well, we're gonna go hit the Memphis Bell track, which is out towards Memphis, the tanker track. So I said, well, obviously we're not going to Europe. And so we hit there, hit the Peach Streets track up over the Grand Canyon. And then just off the Golden Gate, picked up tankers there. One tanker, 2 airplanes, and off we went to Hawaii, you know. And so on day 1. Day 2, we went from Hawaii to Guam. And day 3, we went from Guam to Uman. And get to Uman, and we had some guys who had very recently returned from a combat tour. And
This is
they got
Thailand. You're talking
Thailand,
about.
yeah. And they got to start flying within 2 or 3 days. The rest of it had to go through an indoctrination, briefings, and all that kind of stuff. But it was interesting. One interesting aspect, we're being welcomed by the deputy commander for operations for the 8th Tank Fighter Wing there at Uman, who was Bill Shower, who had been my final squadron commander at Cameron Bay, and he was tolerated, let's just put it. He was not, you know, he could be nitpicky about things on a combat zone. You're wondering, who gives a big, you know? So anyway, so he's up there, you know, and actually, they only wanted our airplanes. They didn't want any more pilots. They had these old F-4Ds that were, you know, they'd been flown and pulled, and they're twisted and whatnot. We had brand new E's, or pretty new E models, nose gun. So they had to use us. I mean, that was the words from on high. So anyway, so Shower's up there doing his thing, and all of a sudden he looks at it and he says, "Hey Gar, how you doing? Come by and chat with me." And my squadron commander, Shock, and DC Best, the other squadron commander, and the 2 ops officers, their heads snapped around and looked at me like, "You know this asshole?" And yeah, I do. Anyway, so I told Shock, he said, "No, go chat with him." You know, so I did. And we just said, you know, "Hey, what you been doing?" and so on and so forth. And then he rotated out. Anyway, did some indoctrination stuff. Then we did 10 ride in theater checkout with an instructor, and I was an instructor pilot at this time as well, but had to do it with somebody there, which is interesting. The guy that I flew with on most of those rides is now here in Tucson. We see each other about every other week or so. And you know, the old small world trick. It's amazing. So we start flying missions. We do everything. We did flying in country. We're going into Laos. We're going into North Vietnam, and we started flying this really crappy mission called Chaff. And Chaff is aluminum strips cut in various lengths so it would confuse radar, and it spread out into the sky and creates a cloud. And then it was primarily so that the surface air missiles, the SAMs, would be foiled. aluminum foil.
So
Was the primary reason for it. And it worked, it was very successful. Unfortunately though, what we would do, we would go and either line up as a line of 8, or in one case we did a 12-ship thing to dismiss this chaff, and it came out and we had a leaflet bomb that they would use to drop propaganda leaflets normally. This thing were filled with chaff, and they drop and create the cloud. Well, we'd line up, line abreast, about 1,000 feet apart, and you know, it was kind of like 12 o'clock high. You know, this is your mission, you will not turn. You know, and just go straight in. And it had somebody who figured out, okay, you know, the drop sequence, so one guy's dropping on this side, you know, and then 5 seconds later somebody's dropping over there. So go straight in over the target, and then turn around and come back, and then after 10, 15 minutes, while the chaff disperses in just normal airflow, then the bomber aircraft will come in, the F-4s that have the laser bombs and the super optics where they can pick out the targets and put a laser on it. You know, they can semi-relax, not totally, because you still had AAA going on here, anti-aircraft stuff. Anyway, so we had that mission, and it was, boy, it was shitty. We kept wondering, you know, something's going to happen someday. They're going to figure out, you know, what we're doing. And I don't know how many our squadrons had done. We did one 12-ship feint one day, downtown Hanoi. That's one of those, you gotta be shitting me, drills where you fly in. It's only because we had laser guys who were going up and taking out all the bridges on the Northeast Railroad, northeast of Hanoi. And we were just, you know, a decoy. It worked, you know. A lot of AAA that day though. My backseater was saying, "Guard, hard left, oh, hard right, hurry, well, goddamn, just go fast. You know, let's get out of here." So, anyway, and this one particular day comes along, and we go in for the briefing, and it's going to be a target is just north of Hanoi. Tai Nguyen was the area, and there's some bridges that they wanted to take out that were needed to be taken out. And I forget, we went on weather hold, canceled. Okay. Well, no, nothing's going to happen for 10 days, at least, because some high-ranking Russian delegation is going to be in Hanoi, and God forbid we should kill a Russian. Though little did we know we actually already had, you know. But they didn't squawk then. Why would they squawk now? Oh, this guy was the president of the Soviet Union that was there. So we didn't do anything. And then another day, afternoon, Toke says, "Okay, Gar, you and Peter are going to be on the heavy tomorrow." That's what we call them, the heavy. And, okay. So, you know, you make sure you know, get a reasonable night's sleep and whatnot. You get up, we go over to Intel, or to the wing briefing room. We walk in, and there's the map. It hadn't changed. It's the same target, the same time, the same altitude. It's the same way Washington called the shots for that effing war, you know, and that's why we lost a lot of guys for no effing reason. I'll contain myself, but I mean, it just kind of, what the hell is this? Okay, so we go on a weather hold.
Why is that a problem? You said
Well, because, you know, we have Thai cleaners that come in and clean out the briefing room. All they've got to do is come over, pull the curtain back, and see where the target is.
Oh, I see.
You know, it's ridiculous. But we had done it for years. That's the way it was done. You had a 10 o'clock TOT and you had a 2 o'clock TOT, you know. And oh, by the way, the best route in is always go over here and go down Thud Ridge. You know, they're just ludicrous, ridiculous. Instead of giving the crews some input to it, like finally happened in Linebacker 2, you know, which I got to observe from the ground, of course. Anyway, so we're set up, okay, weather hold, okay, launch, we're gonna go. Okay, so take off, hit the tanker, and we climbed up, I forget, it's to maybe 22,000 feet, so we could start downhill and get a good head of steam up when we start dropping the chaff bombs. And we had, Shock had already had to go over the command post and get on the secure line to talk to the MiG escort, MiG cap, as they were called. They were coming out of Karat. They were rookies. They had never flown MiG escort. As a matter of fact, they hadn't done any much deep Hanoi work. Anyways, all going to primarily the 8th Wing at Ubon was doing a bombing. The MiG cap was coming out of Udorn. And Karat was, they wanted a piece of the action. So their deputy commander for operations is going to lead the flight, and you kind of go, okay, whatever happens, happens. So we start downhill, getting towards the IP. We're greened up, all the switches are set, all your indications are the bombs are ready to go, and you start hitting the release button. And we start hearing these calls for MiGs, bullseye being handled. I said, okay, bullseye 30 west. MiG come down right 1 o'clock, and it's classical, what they would do. Come down here, it's a Russian tactic, come down, cut across in front of the flight, hoping that maybe you would take off and go after them, chase them. And if not, they would have 2 guys coming from deep 6, the speed of heat coming up behind you, which is what happened. And so we're going in there, the guy came across the nose, I said, "Toe Pete," I said, "Oh shit." I said, okay, keep an eye open, we're, moving around, looking, and we're spread out. My wingman's over here 1,000 feet, Shock was over here 1,000 feet, and we're looking, and I look back up here where the MiG cap was, and those guys are still in kind of a loosey-goosey, fairly close formation, instead of spread out where they can look. And not only that, they still have all their fuel tanks on. They're no more set to engage than a man on the moon. I go, "You've got to be kidding me." And so they're starting to jettison their tanks. And to get rid of one of the centerline tank on the F4, you have to pull the nose up a little bit, put just a little bit of G on it, and it drops off and goes away. So, okay, I don't believe that. And I look at Med, and my wingman was just a little bit behind, but he was a mid burner coming up. Okay, and about that time, just a fairly slight tap to the airplane. Then all hell broke loose with the explosion of the missile. And I had taken one right up the tailpipe from the MiGs that were deep 6. That those guys up there were supposed to, be on the lookout for, force them away from the fight instead of letting them come through. And the flight lead, a guy named Ray Vodovich, later told me, he said, "Well, my wingman number 3 got shot down the airplane that shot you down." I'm going, "Oh, thanks, Colonel. Thanks a lot." And anyway, this guy's background was strategic reconnaissance, as in read SR-71. He wasn't a fighter pilot. They were pumping guys through the personnel system, pumping guys through over there to get their ticket stamped as a DO or as a squadron commander. People were changing jobs every 90 days. They get them
Just to get experience.
just get an OER that said you were. Then they'd go off to some other job. The DO of the 8th Wing, the Wolfpack, a guy named Dick Horton. He never flew a mission. It wasn't a Silver Star mission. I briefed with him one time. He was going to do what he wanted to do was illegal. You could not drop the munition he wanted to drop off the F4 because it tended to collide with the empennage or the tail as it left the airplane. Anyway, he was going to do this because it was a Silver Star mission. We got to get those guys out. And about that time, an Army chopper goes whoop, 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 pulls these 2 guys out, and that was it. So I told that squadron commander what was going on. I said, "Sean, let me tell you what Horn had in mind." He said, "Jesus, who's running this show?" So anyway, so we had people in positions where they shouldn't have been. We had people thought they were warriors that weren't warriors. We had some good guys that were warriors. Quite frankly, in the major and below level, maybe a few lieutenant colonels, but the guys that really were doing the work are the young guys over there, going at it over and over and over. We had two good people in our squad of shock who did this tour, came back, and then 334th returned for linebacker 2, and he led mission after mission after mission, dropping chaff. And he's right there in the category of Felix, in my mind. He's amazing.
So you hear this thud and
Yeah,
and
little tap, explosion. I tried to fly the airplane, but it doesn't fly for shit when you don't have a tail. And, pitching around, we're tumbling. All the lights are on. They say you got a problem here. And the fire lights are up on the glare shield. I think, oh no. I said, okay, pull the handle. Use the handle between the legs. And we jacked about 18,000 feet, going the speed of heat, about 450 knots. Somewhere in the sequence in there, I lost about an inch in height as my vertebrae compressed. And then there we are. It just all of a sudden really quiet, just. And I can hear the drogue chute up here flapping as it stabilizes the seat, and then you don't get pulled out by the parachute until you're about 11,000 feet or so. And all of a sudden, pop! And you look between your legs and go, oh God, man, that's a long way down. And I saw Pete in his chute. I saw somebody in his chute. I wasn't sure that we hadn't, as we're moving around there, somebody hadn't bumped into me. I wasn't convinced I'd been shot down yet. And I wasn't for probably till I saw Pete again about 2 weeks later. I called off everybody's name in the flight. All 16 guys. No response. And that chute just drifts out of sight. And I start to do what's called a 4-line cut, so you can steer the wind, turn it into a little bit of a sport chute. Yanked on it, and nobody told us that when you yank on it, there's a severe ripping sound as you rip some stitching. So I got about half of it done. I go, ooh, I don't like that. So I manually steered the chute for a while, and just kept getting lower and lower and lower. And we had a very strong wind out of the west. So with every oscillation, I'd watch a lot of terrain, friendly, so to speak, terrain go away. And got down over the rolling hills into the scrub brush area and the beginning of the agriculture area. And that's where I landed. I'd seen a guy coming over the hill, about 2 hills over, or little ridges. Collapsed the chute, took off running, and threw my harness off into a ravine, which bought me some time. And then I hear some people coming down the hill, so I just jumped back in some bushes, and like to tell you to do, push the things back so it looks like nobody's been in there. And I laid there for about an hour or so on my right hip, which is where my 38 was, and I still don't have any feeling there in those nerves. You don't move. I mean, there you are, and it just enough pressure over a period of time, and it's And then he found the harness, and they all go that way. And I'm thinking, if that thunderstorm would just get here, if it really rains good, I might be able to reposition somewhere. And then after a bit, they start coming back. There's a guy sitting down on a little rock behind me here, had a cigarette, and he threw the match over into this dry grass, and it starts to ignite. I'm like, this could be a hell of a note. And later, so I got down, I literally with my glove on, flight glove, tapped this thing out. It's getting to be surreal. And then all of a sudden, this guy puts maybe a 22, something, but had a big bore. Looked like to me through the bushes and babbled something, and I knew exactly what he wanted. And so I stood up, and to the best of my knowledge, they did not use zipper one. They used knives and a machete, and all of a sudden I'm standing in the middle of North Vietnam in my t-shirts, skivvies, and socks, which is, you've seen a lot of pictures, I'm sure, of guys being marched around in just t-shirts, skivvies, and socks. And then he tied me up pretty good. These were civilians, and that's a scary proposition. They're bought off. They get a reward if they bring you in, but there's no guarantee that, they're not going to get that reward, that you might just end up dead. Because there are a lot of guys that, no question, that's probably what happened. As we have come to find out over the years. Anyway, it trussed me up pretty tight to where my elbows, can't believe it, once upon a time I was actually that supple. Yeah. Of course,
Were your elbows touched?
I was about 20 pounds lighter, and 29. Still pretty flexible. Anyway, my elbows were just short of touching, and occasionally could touch in the back. And you put a noose around my neck, and off we go, marching to who knows where. And it was an interesting little march. There was one guy who did have a machete, and I see him coming. He'd run up there, and somebody finally with a bamboo pole would knock him out of the way. And then I hear him come from behind, and I'm thinking, okay, what is this? Is this guy finally going to get through and whack me? And the bamboo poles, the guys were, occasionally just arbitrarily reach over and whack me. And I have a real penchant for when I get hit in the head, I get really pissed. But boy, I couldn't do much there. And but I still had that penchant, if I bumped my head on a cabinet, I could. We walked, I don't know, probably several miles and get to a roadhead, a little hamlet that had maybe 3 or 4 buildings and a pig pen. And they put me in a pig pen on a stool. And then this guy comes in who's fairly well, neatly dressed. He's got a white shirt and slacks on. He starts talking to me in what I can assume is French. I don't know. And about this time, they start ringing their air raid warning thing, and so they yanked me up, and I'm going to go back to another story here shortly, but they yanked me up and we go into their air raid trenches. And, Shock and boys had come back in and make one pass down the valley just to kind of, see, if they saw it. They came in low out of the west, turned around just about where I was and went back out, not having heard anything on a radio or anything. So, as we come up out of there, I look around. Well, what they used to build this burn with were all these jettisoned fuel tanks that we would punch off, when we were getting ready to go on the target. So, wow, interesting. And then I look over to see what the guy's ring. He was ringing the all clear now, which was a different, bomb, just one every so often. And it was a hollowed out 750-pound bomb. Good Lord. So anyway, back into the pig pen, and we wait for transportation to Hanoi, essentially. But on the march, or on the walk in, we hit a point where I get yanked off the trail, and then somebody does the old kid thing, hits me in the back of the knees, and I go down on my knees. And everybody clears out from in front of me, and I'm thinking, that's not good. And heard a rifle bolt slide. I'm like, holy shit. So I look up, and it finally dawns on me, one, there's not a thunderstorm in sight, nor was there ever one there. Somewhere I had developed that in my mind. And 2, I said a short prayer for Becky and her son, Glenn. And I was convinced they were going to execute me. That's why I call this sometimes, I've only told this story a couple of times, but it's, how I almost died 4 times in one day. And that was number 2. And here's some jabbering off over here in the distance, and all of a sudden a guy yanks me up by my wrist, which was interesting. That didn't feel real good. He yanks me up, and I look over here, and here's a guy who's got a red star on his helmet. Thank God. At least it's militia. It may not be regular army, but at least it's an arm of something. And so he starts, doing the orders and stuff. And then we go to this, village and just wait. And after a while, I hear chugga 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 of a Jeep or something coming, and they call me out. And at some point I was asking, I said, I'm trying to tell them I'm thirsty. And I kept saying, nah, water, agua. I couldn't think in French what water was. I don't know if I know it to this day. And so somebody finally figured it out. So they brought some hot tea. And hot tea really will soothe your thirst. And here this chugga chugga. And take me out of the big pan, and we go down there. And then over a road, I see another group of people coming, and they've got Pete, a backseater, Pete Callahan. And so this Jeep pulls up, flatbed Jeep, I don't know what you call him, M715 is what it was in the Army parlance, but this lieutenant or somebody gets out and struts, and he comes up and looks at me, and bam, just hauled off, and I saw stars. I didn't go down, but I mean, it got my attention. And then he rips off my t-shirt and he ties this, now I'm blindfolded. And then I hear thud as he whacks Pete. And then we were literally tossed into the back of this Jeep and had guards on either side. And we tried to chat a couple of times. They didn't like that. Not hard with the rifle, but they got our attention that it could be a lot worse. And so off we go. Every little hamlet we come to, they start honking the horn, and so here come the people out, and they're throwing shit at us and whatnot. What do you expect? You're the bad guys. So now it gets dark, and we get to what I can only assume is Viet Tree, which is a bend in the Red River, big ferry crossing. And we get on a ferry. We go to the other side, and there's this gosh awful crowd over there. And this is number 3. They're rocking the truck back and forth. The guy's trying to get the thing going, gun in the engine. What the hell? And I could see just a little bit underneath my thing, and I see a guy about from me to you, about 5-6 feet. Takes off his pith helmet, throws it like a frisbee, and hit me right there. You know how that feels? I mean, stars. You really see stars out of you. God dang. And then we finally were able to break loose a little bit. People chased us, throwing stuff, for a long time. I was really scared. I thought they were going to really kill us. And the guys with the bayonets, instead of having them in at us, had them out at the people. So, they were a little concerned themselves. And then we go off for quite a ways and stop again in some house out in the middle of nowhere, up a little 1-lane road. And they haul us out, and they take us into separate parts of this building. And where I can hear them, interrogating Pete. He said, I could hear them yelling at you and whatnot. And they already knew what type of airplane and what our outfit was. How did they know that? Oh, remember the map back in the intel room? They had a network that was just unbelievable. So name, rank, serial number, that works real good for about 2 minutes, and Time number 4 is when you feel cold steel up against your temple. And this guy behind there in pretty damn good English says, "Okay, Captain Rose, one more time. Name, rank, serial number, we have that. What was your mission?" I said, "Well, grilling chaff." And the guy knew what chaff was. And he said, "No, you." I said, "Yeah." And they knew that already. So then he, after a bit, they take us back outside, and they kind of gave Pete pretty much the same thing. We go back outside. Well, the Jeep has a flat on it. And so Pete and I are put over here by ourselves, no guard or anything. We're watching these guys over there. They've got some flashlights, and they're trying to change this tire. And it was like, I told Pete, I said, this is like watching a monkey try to screw a football. I mean, these people aren't too far removed from the Stone Age yet over there at this time. They've made progress since, but I mean, some of them just. So they finally got some wood, like a 2x4, to prop. They lifted, the thing up bodily, put it on it. Then he took the tire off. I don't know what they did, where they got the spare. I'm surprised. Anyways, so we finally leave. But Pete said, "Okay." He said, "What do you think? You think you ought to go for it?" I said, "Pete, look, you got on white socks and white skivvies. I got on white socks, white skivvies. We're tied up." And I was able to loosen his stuff a little bit, and he was able to loosen my wrist. I mean, the back is still what it was. And I said, "How far do you think we'd get?" And I said, "Do you know where we are?" And he said, "I don't have a clue." And I said, "There's your answer." I said, "We have no choice." So they finally came over and got us through in the truck, and away we went. Somewhere probably an hour or so before dawn, they stopped at a little house, and I was able to put my leg up on the rail of the truck, kind of bend around and take some pressure off my back. I said, "God damn, that feels good." But while my leg was up here, the driver or one of the guards brought this girl out, and to show her, the pirates, air pirates, war criminals. And she rubbed my leg, because they don't have hair on their legs or anything. So she rubbed, very interesting. So she kind of stroked it. And in retrospect, that was the last kind thing, if you will, for 9 months. Which is interesting. Then off we went. We got in towards Hanoi. The smell as we went by the Hanoi POL yards, which are on the north side of the Red. We went across a pontoon bridge, across the Red River, and they put a tarp over us. And the sun was up, and it was miserable. And then he took us back into the Wawa prison, Hanoi Hilton, and took us our separate ways. And then came, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, phase 2 of the capture, I guess, the interrogation. And still semi-blindfolded, took into a room, set me on a stool, and then he just sitting there, he went, "Okay, is there anybody in here?" You don't know. And because they'd redone my blindfold where I could not see. And then here comes the first interrogation, and same thing all over again. What are we doing, where are we going, what on? And you can pretty much, when you want to know what are the future targets? Why, as a captain, why would I know? And they want one other thing. They didn't like it, and the guy gave me a little rap off, knocked me off the stool with his rifle butt. They want to know how many B-52s were at Utapao in Thailand. I'm going, why would I know that? Boom. Which comes another story to follow that up. And at some point, they finally took the blindfold off and took the ropes off. And all this is still hazy, and they leave, and I go up, there's a dead board over there, and I go up and I just curl up and pre-nut, trying to stretch my back as much as I can. I know I'm hurt. And I'd taken a couple of hits, bailing out, so I was, bloody and had some residual blood. And here they come in again for something else, and sleep deprivation is one of their big techniques. Fortunately, there was no torture per se. All the older guys that went through that stuff, when they would just get the shit beat out of them for nothing, they learned that didn't do anything for them. And the world opinion was, the wives of some of the POWs, and then just diplomats, period, had put enough pressure on me, okay, they're not going to do that. And then after the Sante raid, they realized that, we've got a valuable product here, so let's keep them in some semblance of, trade value.
What was the Sante raid?
That's when special forces were flown in out of Nakhon Phanom, Thailand, into Sante camp, which is west of Hanoi. Guys have been kept there for quite some time, about 30, 35. They had been moved prior for some reason. Anyway, they flew, it actually crashed a helicopter inside the compound. Special forces went to all the cells, and they came out, didn't lose anybody. It was an amazing commando feat. I've had a couple of briefings on it, and you just sit there mesmerized,
But there was nobody there.
Nobody there.
Yeah.
That was, they said when they made the call, nobody's here, that you could just, it was dead silence on the airwaves.
But the fact that happened is still in the back of the mind of your captors.
That started bringing everybody into the big rooms, as they call them, at the Hilton, and that's when they really got the act going. And we had guys that had been up there, already at that point 4 years and 4.5, and had very limited contact with anybody, because they kept, and they might be in an adjacent cell, but you didn't get to, eyeball to eyeball. But anyway, the interrogation thing fortunately did not involve torture, sleep deprivation, of course, threats, up one side and down the other. But after you start to come out of the initial shock of it, you can kind of figure out, where they're going, what they want to do, and I played the card that look, I was a captain, and they knew that we weren't, they knew we were in a stateside unit. I mean, all this kind of stuff. Wow. And so start to kind of cat and mouse with them a little bit. You figure, they come in and say, okay, we want to know what Zot. What is the Zot? Well, Zod was just a nickname that we used to, one of the early laser guns that we used to designate targets, literally was mounted on a canopy rail of the F4 in the back seat. And the pilot would go up there and fly just an arc around a target, while the back seater could move the gun a little bit, to designate until the bombs hit the target. And it was called the Zot. Well, there had been an article in Newsweek that showed an F4 doing this and talked about the laser bombs and called it Zot. Well, they were convinced that it was something. And so for hours, I have no idea how long, hours sitting there and saying, okay, Zot, how am I going to describe this? The guy had finally just pulled out the latest issue of Newsweek and said, there. Showed me the picture. I'm going, damn, I hadn't seen that issue. And I said, okay. So I very crudely said, cartoon. Okay. And I convinced him what a cartoon was. And then I said, in America, cartoon, do some stick figures about BC, the comic strip BC. And I said, okay, Anteater, whatnot. They were kind of following me. These guys weren't dummies. These folks kind of had gratitude. It wasn't quite talking in a conversation like you and I, but they were well spoken in English. They had education outside of Vietnam. So, Anteater, okay, yeah, I said, okay. I'm going to get down off my stool. And I've got these stories backwards, but anyway, got down off my stool, and I crawled over to the door sill where there was a stream of ants. I said, Anteater, stop! Folded up your book and walked out. That was the last interrogation of any significance that I had. The other one was one day, they wanted to know how many B-52s were at Utapao. How would I know? I don't even know where Utapao is. I said, it's in Thailand somewhere, but I don't know anything. I said, and I said, why don't you ask the guy that's up on the hill that radios and says, 3 B-52s just took off. And I ended up on the floor from a rifle butt on that one, I can guarantee, and it was not easy. Whack.
Probably smart aleck,
Yeah, So, over the evening squawk boxes, they had some of our guys, Army guys that were out at the plantation would read the latest news and whatnot. They would talk about, the number of B-52s at Utapao. And it was somewhere, 100 and something, and I knew that wasn't right. And so I said, well, maybe, what do you think, 8? So we just kind of played these numbers for most of the day until we got to 52. I said, you may have a job. Yeah, I think it's 52. Folded up the book and they left. Well, they'd been told what to come in and find, so they did and they left. And then the next day, or maybe the day after, did the Zod. Somewhere in there I had a political thing, which I tried to convince this guy that my family didn't own anything and so on and so forth, that we were poor and whatnot. I don't know if he bought it or not. Anyway, he left. Then I told the Zod story, and that happened. And then it was off to, I spent a whole day in that cell just by myself. I mean, nothing happened. Every now and then the chains would rattle, but I think the guards would just go by and rattle the chains on the door just for,
Explain a little bit, as I read through your story, you were at the Hanoi Hilton, and you talked about a heartbreak section.
Yeah.
And then going into solitary, and then places like the zoo and the barn and the pigsty.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, the Wallow, the Hanoi Hilton is the name for the whole complex. And we had names for different sections of it. There was Heartbreak, which is where there was a lot of the really serious torture went on. Heartbreak Hotel, as in Elvis Presley. There's Little Vegas. Each of the cells had names of Stardust and Riviera and whatnot. There was an area, the big room area, they just call it the big room, room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And New Guy Village is another section where it's very small. I mean, the courtyard is probably, from the door over here to the wall was at 15 feet by 10. And I had a cistern out there, had water, and then a place to dump your poop bucket, your shit bucket, each day. But the cells were, small, and that's where they put the new guys. Initially, trying, as they would work them into the system, and try to break them down, whatnot. I went into, I was started, I'm not real sure where, because they had a couple of interrogation rooms right inside the front door. And I know I didn't walk very far from getting out of the truck to go in, so I think there, and then back into another area where it's more of kind of an admin type area. I mean, actually, you had windows and I got to watch an air raid, until the guards saw me. And then somewhere in here, while I was in that place, a guy came and indicated he brought the striped pajamas to me. All this time, I'd been sitting there in my skivvies and socks, But they did bring a mosquito net and a straw mat. Is it? No, June, Hey, it's hot up there, even inside a big building. Anyway, the guy indicates to me that I'm gonna go be able to get cleaned up. Okay, so he says, okay, there's a big cistern, probably about yay high, and bar soap. Oh, so I start to climb in this thing. And he hands me a bucket that had a handle, and he said, okay. Boy, did that feel good. And I stayed as long as he'd let me, and then put on my pajamas and went back to this room and was moved very shortly thereafter into Heartbreak, which is a dark, dingy place. The cell was maybe 6 by 6. I had a spot where I could put my shit bucket and the bedboard, and that was it. And you're just there, I tried to, talk through the door, talk through the wall, nothing. I don't even know if anybody was in that section at that time or not. I was in there 2 or 3 times when there were air raids. And I mean, the blasts from the anti-aircraft things going off would just reverberate, and the doors would, just really carry on. And after a few days in there, I quite frankly don't know the specific dates. They came one day and hauled me out and took me into the big room area and walked into a cell, and way down at the end are Pete and 2 guys. Holy cow, what's going on here? Well, these 2 guys have been shot down a little bit before, a few days before us. And had gone through the same drill, and we were losing enough airplanes that they needed to kind of, keep the process going. And so we were in there for till late in the evening, and they moved us out at that time into a driveway and backed up a Jeep and poured us in the back of a Jeep, and we went out to what's called the zoo, which is out on the southwest part of town, or south part of town. Had 5 main cells. You start out and it's the same for everybody. You start out in the barn, which was a 4-cell, 4-person room, maybe 5 if you really want to squeeze. Had bedboard length, raised concrete, where you put your bedboards in maybe a 3-foot wide area where you could walk. And so put the 4 of us in there, blazing hot, no ventilation whatsoever except a window, but there was nothing there. And we literally would lay around and sweat and take turns walking. I said, guys, you can't just lay down, you gotta keep moving. And that was with Pete and Greg Hansen and Dick fulton. God rest his soul, he died last December. And we're there, we just four guys, we're there, no interrogate, nothing. We see the guard in the morning, he let one of us out to get milk and bread to bring back into the cell, and he rotates, so, and then for the evening meal. And then after a period of time, we knew that there were 5 guys in the cell next to us. And try as we may, we couldn't get them to come up voice or anything. We were talking to the wall behind us. They never did respond. And they finally moved us out of the barn into the pigsty. Now, we didn't know these names until, later, into the pigsty. Actually, one of the guards told us, you're now in the pigsty. Okay. We put the 4 of us over there, and a little bit later, here came the other 5 from the cell next door to us. And so we were a unit now of 9, and I was a senior ranking guy. This particular building at the or at the zoo called the Pigsty is also where there's a famous movie shot for propaganda back in the mid to late 60s, Pilots in Pajamas. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of it.
Heard the name,
Yeah.
but I've not seen it.
Guys playing basketball and whatnot, and of course that was all for propaganda.
Shows.
Well, there was a basketball goal out there, and we actually conned them in to give us a basketball, which was lopsided. Anyway, we'd play horse, but not. And then we had 2 more guys come in over a period of time, Jerry Heron and Mel Matsui. Mel was, oh boy, he wasn't sure what the hell was going on. He was Oriental, he was Hawaiian. And they really pushed on him hard. Nothing physically, but a lot of mental stuff in his interrogation. But let's see, there were Tony Marshall, Tom Hanton, Chuck Jackson, Don Logan. I forget that. Right next door, and then Jerry Heron, and Mel came in.
Is this the time when you were getting the bombings from Linebacker 2?
No. Linebacker 2 didn't start until 18th of December. No, this was August time frame, mid-August, I think is when we got put together. And then in September was when Becky found out that I was alive. I was MIA for about 90 days or so. No, and it was just, drudgery, at least we had something to do. Once a week, we got to make coal balls. They'd bring in coal granules, and we'd sit out there, put a little water on them, and make charcoal. Because if you don't make good coal balls, you don't eat. You go, what? So,
That's how they did the cooking.
yeah.
Well, then I'm not trying to rush ahead, but when you're during that Linebacker phase, when there was all the bombing going on, was that an indication to you that something was happening?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We were sitting there in the pigsty playing. Some of the guys had been moved out to another place. We were down to 7 now, I guess. 3 on one side, 4 on the other. And we're sitting there playing bridge, no peaky bridge, because we didn't have cards. You just drew it on sheet paper. You had to, trust each other, which we all cheated. Anyway, we're sitting there playing bridge, and this F-111 came through the front door and out the back on the 18th of December, about 8 o'clock in the evening. And I mean to tell you, we looked at each other and said, holy shit. Then boom, 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 you hear 12 bombs go off. Wow. Things are back on. And then the lights go out and the AAA starts shooting and all that. Then after a bit, you hear this strange sound. We go, that's it. That's our ticket, And we didn't know how long it was going to last, but we knew the jig was up. We felt because Nixon had won the election that it was a mandate. Okay, let's, crap or get off the pot.
And when you say the jig is up, you think that you're going to be killed by the bombing?
No.
Or is that the war's going to end?
The war's going to, we're going to be released eventually. Yeah. I mean, and you always think the next holiday you're going to get released, the next year, first thing Pete asked me was, how long are we going to be here? I said, about a year. I said, we got a bunch of guys here ahead of us, Pete. And now, where did I come up with that? I have no earthly idea. But, well, maybe by Christmas. Well, maybe by next Thanksgiving, And any little straw in the air. The SR-71 quit flying over. Used to come over every day at high noon. Boom, boom. The double sonic boom. Then it quit coming. Boom. Wow, wonder what that is. And then it started again. But the Linebacker was interesting. We were 3 of us in our cell. Greg Omar and Henson and Mel. And at first, we'd try to look out the windows and whatnot. And then as pieces of the tile would fall off the roof down through the mat above us and crash in our cell, we said, maybe we need to do something to protect ourselves. And we asked the guard the next morning, said, can we, get another bedboard or two to build a little shelter? And so we built a shelter. And then we decided, well, how are we going to do this? Because we'd all cram in there, initially, every time there was an air raid in it. Finally, we just crawl in at night when it got dark and go to sleep. And we said, okay, this is what we're going to do. Between raids, we're going to rotate so it's somebody in the middle in case there is some kind of hit close to us. The two on the outside might absorb, something, and the guy in the middle might survive. And it worked, though we never got hit. But eventually, we had no roof over our head, and that was from AAA. That wasn't from bombs. Guns were going off everywhere. There's a quad 37 battery behind us, which would be 8 barrels, firing 37 millimeter shells. It sounded like a loud clap of thunder with each of them. Blam, blam, blam. Thank goodness it didn't rain any. I don't know what the hell they were doing. Then he said, "What do you want to dig a bomb shelter?" And we knew they were starting to get serious. They were getting scared. I said, "Yeah, we'll start." So we started digging one. And I said, "We have a question. We have one of the people has a question. One of the officers." And so they let us out of our cell at dinner time, and around the corner comes this high-ranking guy. He had 4 stars and 4 bars in there in city. So he was son buddy. And he walks up to me, and Mike, I tell you what, in perfect Stanford English says, "Gentlemen, I have a question." You gotta go, you gotta be kidding me. Anyway, our camp medic was towing the back end of a 500-pound retard bomb, which 111 had gone down the back wall one night. There's a huge antenna complex out there. And this thing had come over the wall on explosion and hit on top of the medic's little manhole where he was. And obviously scared the shit out of him. Anyway, they wondered what size bomb it came off of. And so, we got together and we looked at it, like monkeys. And I'm pretty sure it came from a 1,000-pound bomb. As we got ushered back into our cell, I said, "Guys, we may have just really gotten ourselves in deep doo-doo because we lied, But why not feed them some information? That's still erroneous. That's the name of the game." And I think it was that night. There's a delegation from the United States over there at the time. It was Ramsey Clark, Joan Baez, and then there was a guy, I don't know his name, who was with the Vietnam Vets Against the War. And they were trapped in Hanoi. Anyway, but they brought him out to the zoo, and we hear Joan Baez, or, the song Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. What the heck? That sounds like Joan Baez. And they didn't make us do anything. Normally make you line up and all of these. And all of a sudden, around the corner, here comes Joan Baez and Ramsey, this real tall guy, and then this short guy. And she sang Kumbaya for us, Wahoo. And Ramsey Clark, of course, wanted a glad hand, and we essentially just kind of looked at him and just didn't give him much attention. The Vietnam vet against the war, he said, can I stick my head in your cell? I said, "Sure, go ahead." He said, "God, that's pretty austere." We go, "Oh, you think?" Well, Greg had collected a bunch of little fragments, and these people had been told that all the damage was from bombing. And so Greg handed this Vietnam vet guy, said, "I have some shrapnel in my hand. Can you take it and get it back and get it analyzed to show that it's not U.S. weapons?" And the guy took it and turned it over to people. And we, of course, we never heard back or anything, but at least he did that for us. And then maybe it was that night, Christmas Eve night, well after dark. All of a sudden they'd come along with flashlights. You know, power was out at this point. The flashlights said, prepare to move, you know, get all your stuff. So they crammed all 32 or 3 of us, how many there were, into the back of a deuce and a half. And off we go through the streets of Hanoi. We have no idea where, you know. And, you know, we're talking amongst ourselves and saying, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Not in this circumstance, but good to see you're alive. Because there were 2 guys there from my unit, you know, or from Seymour Johnson that I knew, you know. And so they were able to tell me something about, you know, how Becky and Glenn have been doing. You know, all we can think is, well, you know, the Navy guy said, you know who roams around at night and can see this truck going down the road just like nothing? Are the intruders. We better hope none of those guys are out tonight, you know, because they might just nail our ass. Anyway, so they took us to the Hilton, and we go into this big room, and there are 4 guys down in there already, who had no contact with anybody, and actually had not really had too much interrogation because of all the other stuff that was going on. And so we go down and all introduce ourselves. We set up our beds. And, you know, we're dirty, dusty, smelly. We didn't care. You know, just crashed. And early in the morning, on Christmas morning, you hear water slosh, slosh. You look up. You know, it's cold. We look up. And there's Bud Breckner, our SRO. He's over there at the cistern going, oh. Yeah, just bathing. And he says, okay, men, next. And so we all took a bath. We all put on ostensibly fresher clothing, you know. And they actually gave us a little bit of a Christmas thing, I think, some, what we call dynamite duck. They take a duck and chop it up, or put a stick of dynamite up its butt and blow it up and give it the remnants. And then that was just, you know, wading through all the air raids. And then a couple of nights later, they moved us all into New Guy Village. I mean, stacked us in like cordwood. We were all in there. And then on the 30th, I said, what the hell is that? They're shooting off fireworks. Why in the hell would they be shooting off fireworks? And somebody, and we're talking out to the wall, but the wall was from here to there, so you could get pretty good travel out of it. And I said, what do you think, the war's over? I don't know, it's possible. And sure enough, that was, you know, really what it was. We just didn't know yet. And the agreements had not been signed. We just stopped the bombing. That was the last night of Linebacker. And then they said, okay, they opened up a shower area to us where you could really take a real shower. And the first guys in there, it's colder than hell, but you know, when you start running in bodies, things, by the time we got to our cell, we go, God, this is almost like, you know, comfort. So, and then after we essentially got cleaned up, a couple of days later, they moved us back to the zoo, back to our original buildings, and brought some more guys out and filled up the other buildings. And we got, then they marched us all into the theater one day. This had been a film studio before the war. They marched us all into the theater, and the guy says, I must tell you, he goes on and on under the agreements and reads all this shit off and whatnot, and tells us the circumstances, how the release is going to be, and so on and so forth, which was exactly what had been put out from our guys, from General Flynn and the guys. Most of it carried out by Doug Hegdahl, the Navy seaman that got blown off his ship. He got released early, the only honorable release, early release. Fortunately, he had photographic memory and could remember he came out with all the names, yeah, at least up to that point, you know. And also what we wanted was first in, first out, after the sick and wounded, and so on and so forth. And so they told us, well, here's the release thing. So we heard, okay, well, it's going to be somewhere about the end of March. And we all got to mingle all day. We played volleyball. We couldn't go into each other's building, but we all met out in the courtyard, hanging out. And one day, C-130 flew over. That was pretty exciting.
Well, there was a situation, I guess, where the release had stalled out
That was right at the end.
right at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the first release, we were there during nap time, and one of our guys, Steve Rudloff, Navy F4 Rio, says, "Hey, listen to that, that's a 141. We go, couldn't hear a thing. Then all of a sudden you start hearing that peculiar sound, and up over the banana trees outside the wall, here's this beautiful 141, white and gray, red cross on it. We're going, holy shit, okay, there goes the first group. And which, as it turns out, was not the case. The airplane had been sent around because on short final, I mean, he was ready to land, and there was a hiccup, so he had to do a pattern and come back and land because they were talking directly to the Pentagon via HF radio. And I'd learned that from a buddy of mine that was deep into the Mac business. So we started counting down, and then one day they said, okay, you get your go-home clothes, and we're going to return things that were taken from you when you were captured. And guys got back watches. P.K. Robinson got 2 $100 bills back. They kept it. And that's how we found out a lot of stuff about guys and captures and guys that are MIA, because those people are just like the Germans. War II, they wrote down everything. Well, so have the Vietnamese. So, anyway, so okay, this is it. And we get a go-home meal, dynamite duck, and a beer. Okay, wow, and we're wired for sound. And up most of the night, and early morning, somebody looked out and they said, there's no transport, out here in the courtyard. And then we see Joe Kittinger, Colonel Kitt, walking across the way there. He said, uh-oh, because he was down the SRO. And then he comes over the door and he said, guys, we're not going home today, there's a glitch. We all got a good night's sleep. Next morning, there's buses out there. And what it was they had balked about releasing the guys that they were holding that had been captured in Laos. They said, no, Laotians control that, not us. And they said, airplanes are loaded. They got bombs on them. You ready? Because they were going to the Stone Age the next time. No doubt in anybody's mind. Anyway, so we loaded up, went out to Gilon, march off in order of shoot down. The guy who had been one of the worst torturers and interrogators, particularly with the older guys, we called him Plato because he thought he was smarter than we were. They called him the rabbit because he had huge ears, was reading the names. We're going, you gotta be kidding me. But he also spoke some of the better English. So he reads off our names, step away, there's somebody from either the C-130 or the 141 escorts us out to the airplane. Get on the airplane, away we go. And
What's that feel like?
it's unbelievable. One, just to take off, airborne, okay, international airspace, and then wahoo. They had cigarettes, they had current magazines, newspapers, everything. They had pretty nurses, and about halfway to Clark, or a little bit more, the public affairs guy on there says, okay, folks, let me have your attention. So he tells us what to expect. And, we had no earthly idea. He said, okay, now when we hit Clark, he said, but based on previous stuff. He said, everybody at Clark will be there. And he will. Colonel Kent got off first. He made some brief comments. And Animal Gaylor, Sinkpack was there. And I forget the Air Force general's name. Anyway, you step up to the door, they read your name in your hometown, and you look out, 4,000 or 5,000 people. Screaming, yelling, rolling. Wow. So, go get in the bus, go to the hospital. And boy, they took blood, they did all kinds of stuff. As thorough a physical as I ever had in 12 hours. And then the next night, the last group of guys came out. So we got to watch that. And that was thrilling. Of course, then we got to eat too. Got to call home. Got some initial debriefing. Like, is there anything you need to immediately, tell somebody? You need to tell them right? No, I'm fine. And then on the third day, I guess it was, we took off and headed for Hickam. And then at Hickam, we split off into airplanes. The airplane I was on was going to stop in Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, and then at Andrews in Washington. Another one was going to go to San Francisco, then San Diego, to get the guys into their home hospital, dispersed. And every place there was, we'd pull in and huge crowds.
You actually got to visit the White House, didn't you?
We did, yeah. About a month, let's see, 6 weeks after we got back, President Nixon wanted to throw a party. And he invited everybody up there. The hotels put us up. The chefs from around D.C. all cooked. The wait staff were the premier of the restaurants.
That's not
unbelievable.
That's not the typical welcome that the Vietnam veteran got.
No, not by any stretch. As a matter of fact, there are some things that we had some guys that probably should have met a court.
For collaborating with the enemy, you mean?
Yeah. But President Nixon put the kibosh on it. He said, guys, we're on a roll, essentially. Let's not fuck it up. And I mean, that's almost a verbatim. So, at least the F-bomb is. That's General Flynn said, I was there when he said it, and he said it. So, anyway, we're there. Gosh, there were all kinds of movie stars, John Wayne and whatnot. Anyway, and it was just an amazing night, huge tent out on the East End. And as we're going in, I look up, here comes Henry Kissinger. So I held the door for him. He said, oh, no, like you. So I turned to Becky and I said, honey, you said if you ever saw Henry Kissinger, you give him a kiss. And so she did. He blushed. I mean, it was really neat.
So after all of the welcome, the emotion, the high emotion, the optimism, all of that, then when everybody finally has gone home and you're back in your regular life, what sorts of feelings come in that quiet moment after everything lets down?
You're just damn glad to be alive, glad to be home, glad to be with family, glad to be with friends. But you want to get on too. You want to get on with life. It's time. We got an automatic 90-day convalescent leave. Then there were some guys that went on longer than that because they had to have some surgeries and stuff like that. Then it was kind of back, get back to work. You want to fly again? Okay, we're going to send you to San Antonio to Randolph Air Force Base. You do a 30-hour flying training program down there, and then you're on to your next assignment.
How long were you in the Air Force after that?
Well, I retired in '86, so I was in the Air Force for another 13 years.
In Europe, part of that?
Some of that, did a 3-year stint with the Army.
With the Army? How'd that happen?
We have air liaison officers with the Army units.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
who now are finally getting some recognition in Iraq and Afghanistan, because they're out there, they're the ones that are calling a lot of these shots on the bombing of the terrorists.
to coordinate it, you need somebody who knows.
Yes, and so he did that. Actually, it was a great assignment. It was in Stuttgart, Germany, and just working with the Army is kind of a different group at times. And then came back out here after that tour. Came out to Tucson in the A-10. Stayed here for 6 years instructing in it. Loved it. Had a command position. My unit was identified as one of the best in Tactical Air Command. Very proud of that. Great group of guys. Still in touch with a lot of them. Or they're in touch with me more than, I'm in touch with them.
But at some point, enough is enough.
Yeah, in January, well, essentially I wasn't selected for full colonel. And I said, I've seen what happens to people that hang around. You get really crappy jobs. You don't get to fly in some cases. And so I said, I think I'll pull the plug. And a good buddy of mine had mentioned one time that he was looking for somebody to come over to Hughes Aircraft and be a tech rep on the Maverick missile. And in other words, take all this technical jargon that the engineers come up with and turn it into fighter pilotese, and then go out to the field and talk to the fighter pilot. So I did that for about 3 years, and loved it. It was just like I'd walk into a briefing room and I said, "Wait a minute, I've been here before," because I knew most of the guys, from the training. And did that. Becky's career took off. We moved to California. I flunked cooking and housekeeping 101. And
But you took up piloting for what?
I started flying for American Eagle.
Yeah.
The regional airline for American.
So you did 10 years with them so you could fly for free, huh?
Essentially for free, exactly. And then that became a job, and instead of fun. And I said, I don't need this. So in 2000, I pulled the plug. And my mom passed away in 2000 and left a little bit of inheritance. And I said, I lived in a golf course area, and I said, I think I'm going to buy a golf cart and learn to play golf. And I did. Not well. I reached a point where I'm not going to get any better, but I wasn't getting any worse. Played with a great group of people and whatnot. And then Becky decided she had all the fun she wanted. And, well, what are we going to do? We were outside of Houston at the time. I said, well, we've got that single-story house in Tucson with desert landscaping and a pool out back. What do you think? She said, if you'll let me rehab it the way I want to do it, we'll go. Okay. On my Quicken program, I have a category called Redecoration Capistrano. For the street. I have never run a final figure on it. I don't want to know.
But it's a good life.
Oh, absolutely.
Everything has come together.
Absolutely. We've had a lot of fun. As you well, we have friends here with us this weekend that we're at our wedding. Actually, Terry was manning the guest book for a while, and we've been in touch. We fell out of touch for a little bit in the early 70s, and then Terry found us in the early 80s, and it's like we do 2, 3, 4 times a year, and they live up in the Bay Area. And we have other friends like that. It's just, good life.